By far the most pressing crisis facing humanity today is climate change. Across the world, temperatures are rising and the weather is increasingly unpredictable and extreme. As a result, the poorest people in the world find their life and livelihoods turned upside down. Even in the Western world, the effects of climate change are becoming more visible. At their worst, heat waves, wildfires and floods have led to death and the devastation of communities. The problems which we face can sometimes seem overwhelming, and government actions often lacking. As with all areas of social concern, the Church has a distinctive response to the challenges of climate change. In 2015, Pope Francis published the encyclical Laudato Si'. In that letter to the world, the Pope emphasised three key points which form the bedrock of Catholic teaching on the environment. Firstly, that creation is a gift from God for the good of all, and not to be treated as an object for exploitation and destruction to enrich a few. This gift is for every generation, and not just our own. Secondly, humans have a duty to be the responsible stewards for creation. We share a common home with creation, which we must live alongside and protect. Thirdly, humanity and creation are interconnected and interdependent. This is the idea of integral ecology. Integral ecology recognises that when the environment is degraded and damaged, this invariably leads to human suffering. As Pope Francis puts it, we must hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor as one. Now, although a love for nature as God's creation is justifiably associated with St. Francis and the Franciscan order, the Dominican order also has a long tradition of recognising the importance and goodness of creation, going right back to St. Dominic himself. In 1216, Dominic founded the Order of the Preachers as a response to the heresies of a group called the Albigensians. The Albigensians believed that there was a split between matter and spirit, and that matter, creation, was evil. If the created world is evil, then we could disregard any duty to care or act as stewards towards it. St. Dominic, by contrast, promoted the idea that all creation is a precious gift from God, a source of wonder and inspiration directing us to its maker. It is, as the book of Genesis puts it, very good. Dominic's thought that creation was not simply something to be used, but to be valued as God's work and gift, is now more important than ever. The message that we should care for creation also echoes through the centuries in the Dominican tradition. One of the most famous Dominican saints, St. Martin de Porres, is an example of this. Living in Peru in the 16th century, not only did Martin spend his entire adult life running an infirmary for sick people, but he extended this care to healing dogs, cats, and even turkeys. Not only this, but he refused to eat meat. As a result, Martin became the patron saint of social justice. His life embodies the idea that God's compassion is limitless and includes non-human animals and our wider environment. Here is Dominican Father Mike Deeb speaking about his own realisation about the extent of God's compassion, which led him to change his own attitudes.
But even more than that, it's become a deep spiritual issue for me, because I've had to ask the question, where does compassion begin and end? You know, the essential thing about Jesus for me is compassion. That's probably the primary value. His compassion, God's compassion for us, for God's whole creation, and where does compassion begin and end? You know,
the obvious question which arises from this view of the environment is how can it be balanced with our human needs? Here we can return to the idea of integral ecology. Integral ecology emphasises that the preservation of our human needs, our right to life, our ability to access food and shelter, to go to work, is intimately linked with the health of the natural environment. For example, as the effects of climate change have become more extreme, the world's poorest have suffered most as a result. Hence the link between human needs and environmental degradation. In light of this, we therefore require a global structural response which addresses human and environmental concerns together. Crucially, this response must involve listening to the cries of the world's poorest, who will be the first to be impacted by the climate crisis. To help their voices be heard, Dominicans who live and work in some of the poorest communities across the world communicate with their brothers and sisters who run an office at the United Nations. They then try to raise awareness of the situation at an international level. As a country which is one of the most at risk from climate change, the UN Office has worked a great deal on the Philippines in recent years. Specifically, the Office has helped to push back against the exploitation of natural resources by large corporations for economic gain. For example, in 2021, a company began dredging the shoreline to mine for black sand, a lucrative commodity in international markets. Not only did the company pollute and destroy the natural shoreline, but they pretended that they were doing so to restore and protect it. The local community recognised this deception. Father Añedia Curi, the Dominican permanent delegate to the United Nations, explains how the local Dominicans joined with the community and, through an intervention at the UN level, were able to stop the company.
Our brothers and sisters, the Dominican family, were very active, built a coalition there, which was supported from Geneva here, to the extent that they had to stop it. They had to stop the company and actually fined them. You know, the government, they had to pay a fine for what they were doing. But that was something that the Dominicans brought to the surface. So,
through intervention at UN level, the Filipino communities were able to bring their concerns to an international audience, thereby protecting natural resources and the local environment from the danger of pollution and destruction. The principle of integral ecology means recognising the interconnection of human rights, including basic human dignity, and a thriving natural environment. As the effects of climate change worsen, the rights of the poorest to food, water, sanitation and health will increasingly be put at risk. Both the Dominicans in the UN and the Dominicans for Justice and Peace have emphasised this. They have tried to raise awareness by promoting human rights advocacy alongside climate education. For example, in the Solomon Islands, logging is a huge problem. If it continues at its current rate, the natural forests will be exhausted in 15 years' time. Logging on a mass scale like this erodes the soil, and soil erosion affects both the quality of the water and increases flooding, which endangers housing and infrastructure. Alongside this, logging companies have also been heavily involved in the commercial and sexual exploitation of children. To counter this, Dominicans in the UN have trained friars and sisters living in the Solomon Islands so that they're able to accurately identify, document and monitor instances of both human rights and environmental abuses. After they have built up a body of evidence, their accounts can then be brought to attention at the UN level, putting pressure on the government to restrict logging activities. In this way, a local problem can be raised at an international level by the people affected in their own words. As the scale of the problem is so large, trying to combat climate change on an individual level can seem pointless. Nonetheless, we should push, individually and collectively, for change. If nothing else, we owe it to people in places like the Philippines and the Solomon Islands who experience the effects of climate catastrophe every day. Sister Margaret Mace, the International Coordinator of Dominican Sisters International, reflects upon her early experiences working alongside the poor in the Global South. There, she made an important realisation which still motivates her work today.
I often reflected on those years as an opportunity to see the underside of development. The part of the world that clearly had none of the conveniences that we would have. But the people and the environment were exploited so that we could live the way we live.
We owe it to those most impacted by climate change to act in solidarity with them and do all we can to mitigate its effects, irrespective of how small or insignificant our acts might seem. So, what can you do? Sister Margaret suggests the Laudato Si action platform.
So something as simple as becoming familiar with the Laudato Si action platform is eminently doable. Anybody can do it. It's online. It's in 7 or 8 different languages. It's all there. I mean, to my mind, there's no reason not to be involved with it.
You can sign up as an individual, as a family, as a class, or as a school. The platform suggests different actions which you can put in place in order to reduce your carbon footprint, live less wastefully, and avoid contributing, insofar as this is possible, to exploitation. Along the way, you can track your progress and edit your goals as best suits your need. Although it can seem overwhelming, our small actions can make a difference, even if it is only in our immediate environment. Remember, think global, but act local.
Even in the face of overwhelming situation, we need hope, because without it, it's over. We have to keep hoping that tomorrow will be better, even in the face of what we are seeing. So I will say to them, well, don't give up, Let's keep trying the little we can try, because without it, things things will get a lot worse. It's true. There's one of my favorite African proverbs, about trying your best and never underestimate what you can do, that the impact of the little you can do. Said, okay, if you think one is too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a room with one mosquito in it.